The CDC tells us that 94% of people who die from COVID-19 have other serious comorbidities. This is not often stated on the nightly news, so I'm going to show you how to find this information out for yourself. Go to your favorite search engine and type in COVID comorbidities and then CDC. That's usually the way I go. As you saw when I was typing, it was showing up the auto population. This first one is the one you want, COVID-19 provisional counts, and you can see it's from the cdc.gov. Click on that link. Brings you to this page. Scroll down a little bit. Choose option number 4, comorbidities and other conditions. Reading this first couple of sentences, we can see here, for 6% of the deaths, COVID-19 was the only cause mentioned. Table 3 shows the types of health conditions and contributing causes mentioned in conjunction with deaths involving coronavirus disease 2019 COVID-19. For 6% of the deaths, COVID-19 was the only cause mentioned. And so what that means is 94% of COVID-19 deaths also had other serious illnesses that contributed to the death. So you can find this information. We'll look at table 13 now. It tells us, it's interesting, this is a government website. It tells us that it's week ending 1/4 to January 4th through February 13th. It was updated February 17th. This is updated on a weekly basis. What we want to look at here is deaths, COVID-19 deaths as of February 13th for all ages, 455,247. That's what we hear in the news. Those types of figures is what we hear in the news all the time. How many times have you heard that out of that 455,000, 206,000 of them also had the flu and or pneumonia? So let's do some quick math on that. We're going to say 206,834 flu pneumonia, and divide by the total number of deaths, 455,247. And what we're going to find here is more than 45% of people who died from COVID-19, more than 45% also had the flu and or pneumonia. So when you hear 455,000 people died of COVID-19, you need to keep in mind that 45% of those also had influenza and or pneumonia. Let's look at the next biggest one that shows right here at the top of this list here, respiratory failure. Now that sounds pretty serious to me, respiratory failure. 171,000 people died of COVID and respiratory failure. So let's do the math on that, and we'll just leave it at that. 171,260 had respiratory failure, and divide that by the total, 455,247 COVID deaths, and we see that almost 37% of people who died from COVID-19 also had respiratory failure. I'm not telling you what to believe, folks. I'm just providing facts. The fact that you hear, according to the CDC, as of February 13th, the fact that you hear is 455,247 people died of COVID. The facts that you don't hear is that more than 45% of those people also had influenza and pneumonia. You also don't hear that almost 37% of those people had respiratory failure. And as you can see, there are a lot of other comorbidities that we could look at that are contributing factors. Diabetes is another bigger one, 72,000. So there are a lot of comorbidities that are not routinely reported on. Remember, the CDC itself tells us that 94% of COVID-19 deaths had some other contributing ailment to the death. This is a fact. I'm not telling you what to believe, folks. I'm not telling you to think COVID-19 is nothing. I'm not telling you to think that COVID-19 is the worst plague since the Spanish flu. I'm just pointing to facts. And as you can see, we spent our entire time on the CDC.gov website, except for the few moments to find this site in the web search. It's all about truth, facts, and logic. Do your homework, come to your own conclusions.